Alright guys, so let's talk about AI harness. Why? Because this term is used a lot in the AI world and I see that a lot of people get confused by it. So in this video, let's clarify what a harness is so that you are never confused about it ever again. Alright, so if you think of a single line definition of harness, like if you have to define it in a single line, then it would be the system that wraps the model with instructions, context, tools, safety checks in a way that people can use it effectively and safely. So think of the model like an engine, like a car engine, right? You can't directly use a car engine to go from A to B. You need the body of the car, the wheels, the steering, the gear system, like a lot of different things, right? So all of those things, the vehicle is actually the harness and the engine is basically the model. Now, in terms of AI model, what does the component of this vehicle looks like? So it looks like context, like what information is provided to the model to basically take action effectively. Then it looks like tools, like what MCPs, what skills, what plugins, what connectors do you have for the model that it can use to do the work. So this would be something like if you're coding. So Superpowers is one of the very popular plugins for coding. And that basically becomes a tool which is available for the model to basically do things like write a spec, create tests, write the code. Then it looks like memory. So you won't always want to kind of, give all the context to a model from scratch every time you're starting a project. So the model should have a memory so that it would remember that where it is in a project, like in which stage of the project the model is in, so that it can take the next steps effectively without you always reminding it about the project, about the context, about the goal. And then comes the checks, like what safety features it has, what access control features it has. So all of these things combined basically make up AI harness. Now these things, the four things that we just talked about, these are very basic. So we'll go into a bit more details in this video. But overall, when you think of a harness, this is what you can think of. You can think of the AI model as the engine and harness as the car, like the body of the car, the wheels, the steering, the gear system, everything. A lot of times I see that people get confused and they think that the model itself is harness. Like someone recently said that Claude Fable is a great harness, is a very strong harness. And that is not really true. Like that is not actually the case. The model will have varying levels of power, but it is the harness, like the system which is built around the model that then provides it with instructions. It provides it with data. It provides it with tool access and things like logs and evaluations that basically makes it useful for real workflows. Now you might be thinking that why are we calling it a harness? Like why are we not calling it just a system or a process or a software built around a model, right? There's a very simple way of thinking about this. Think of Doctor Strange, the Marvel superhero. His main power is basically channeling the power of different dimensions. So in a way, he's harnessing all that power. Like he's harnessing all that power of different dimensions. And this harness naming is very similar to that. So what happens is a model has raw power. Like it will have it's very powerful. It can kind of write a lot of code, do a lot of things. But generative AI is also very random. Like it will go in all sorts of directions, like without using any harness. If you give it any task or ask it something, it can just go wild in many different directions. So to make sure that the power could be used in a controlled way, in a way which is actually helpful, so that is where you add controls and you make it repeatable so that you don't have to give the same instructions again and again and again to do any sorts of thing with the AI model. So you add these things, like you add control and you make it repeatable through a harness. That makes a model plus system, which basically makes it harnessed AI. And then that leads to a useful output. Now, you would also be surprised to know that you are also a harness. Okay. So think of it like this. Like if you ever use ChatGPT, so what you do, you basically give it a prompt, then you give it context. Like you paste more information about the thing that you are researching or trying to find solution to. Then you look at the results and then you make sure that those results are actually correct. So in a way, you are giving the input, you're adding context, you are getting an output, and then you are evaluating the output. So you are doing the work of a harness when you use ChatGPT like this. Now with softwares like Claude Code and Codex, what happens here is most of that harness becomes software harness. For example, you can create an agent with a fixed set of prompts, so you can fix the instructions there. You can add MCPs so that it would know which sources to look at for information. So it will get the context and then it can take action on its own. So for example, if you wanted to basically analyze a technology news every morning and send you a summary of it, it can take action. Like it can save it for you on your computer or it can kind of, send you an email about it. Then with all the information, it can basically take action. For example, like if you create an agent and ask it to basically give you a summary of all the tech news every morning at 8 a.m. So that prompt can be saved as a template. It can look at context, maybe it can check the web, and then it will basically take action. Like it will summarize all the things and then it will validate it. Like it will make sure that the summary is actually useful to you. Like it is in the format that you want and it covers the topics that you are interested in. So yeah, in a way, you are also a harness for AI, but with tools like Claude Code and Codex, a lot of that harness is being moved to software now. Now, if you think of basic parts of AI harness, so let me pull up my Claude Code. So what happens is when you send a prompt or when the agent takes an action, there's like hundreds of different things going on in the background. For example, when you invoke an agent, so it basically checks like what skills to use, what MCPs to use, what permissions it has. For example, on this one, I have bypass permissions on. So it basically has permissions to everything. And apart from these few things, like a lot of different things goes on. For example, if the context gets too long, the harness basically summarizes it and compacts it. So it's called compaction. But there are some of these important things that we should look at that basically makes the important parts of an AI harness. And these things are basically used in any of the current AI harness softwares. So the first one is prompt. This is either manual or the harness can also save the prompt through skills and agents. Then it will have a way to provide the model context. This could be through connectors or MCPs. Then it will have tools, like it will provide model the tools. Again, this could be through MCPs, skills, or connectors. After this, it will provide the model to know which state it is in. For example, if you are working on a very long project, very large project, so you won't want to kind of, like give your AI model the current state of the project, the current state of the task every single time. You would want the model to already have the context of that. And that is provided by the harness. Next is permissions, like what can the model touch? What can it modify? What things it has access to. We talked about permissions here. For example, like this one, I've set it to bypass permissions, but you can have varying level of permissions. So you can set it to always ask you before it takes any action, or you can kind of set it somewhere in between, which is called the auto mode, or you can just go full YOLO mode and bypass the permissions for your agent. Now, sometimes what would happen is maybe you're not getting the result that you expected. So in that case, you may want to debug what's going on with your agent, and that is made possible through logs. For example, in Claude Code, if I go to debug, so you see, you can enable the debug logging. And then what will happen is you as well as your agent will be able to see like what's happening in the background when you kind of, run any task. And then that will help you debug what's going on, like why the result is not as you expected to. Apart from these, there's the interface, the buttons and UI that you use for the harness. And then of course, there are checks, like it can check and review the output. Now, the other important concept of harness is basically the loop. So basically when you run a task with an AI system, it's not like it just answers something just once. It basically runs a controlled loop. For example, when you ask it to code something for you, so it will basically like run a loop. Like it will try to figure out what the goal is, what permissions it needs, what the approach should be, and how it should write the code, how it should review the code. Now, all of this process basically will happen again every time you ask an AI agent to write a code for you or build an app for you. So it will basically like observe the input. It will basically decide what to do. It will then basically take action on it and generate results. It will check the result and then it will report back to you. And this loop will happen again and again every time you are giving that goal or task to your AI agent. And that basically makes a loop, which is very important concept of AI harness. Now imagine a situation where you have set your AI agent to basically go through your email inbox and just draft a reply. Like you don't want it to send the reply, but just draft the reply. But your AI model basically goes on to send the reply to. That will be a tricky situation. You won't want that to happen, right? So those checks and balances, those permissions, they are also controlled by the harness. So the harness also decides what the AI model is allowed to touch, what it is allowed to do. And that is why you should always be using a harness that you can trust. Because if the checks and balances are not in good shape, then the AI model can take actions that may create problem for you. So yeah, always use a harness which is trusted, that you trust, that you have tested. All right, let's go a bit deeper into the email triage harness. So let's say if you want to use your AI agent for replying to your customers. So you want it to basically go through your email inbox every day to classify like what is the intent and what is the urgency, to maybe add context of customer history. And then based on all that information, it should also draft a reply. And then it should make sure that whatever it has drafted, it is per your company's policy and the tone matches like how you would actually respond to someone. After that, you want to manually approve those replies before it is actually sent to the customers. So you won't want your AI harness to miss this step, because this becomes very important. Like, maybe you're not comfortable with AI sending replies without your approval, which is where your harness can add these permission checks before anything is actioned, like before the reply is actually sent to the customer. Now, what we are talking about here, this entire workflow. So you can basically have your AI agent, AI model, basically do all of these things in a sequence, which is where, again, your harness comes in and basically automates the entire thing into a real workflow that saves you a lot of time. So that is why the harness becomes so important. So guys, you can actually use this checklist to basically spot a harness, and to solidify the mental model of the harness, think of the model as the engine and harness as the vehicle, like the car that basically takes you from A to B. You can't go from A to B using just an engine. You'd actually need a vehicle, and that vehicle is the harness. I hope you liked the video. I'll see you in the next one. Till then, bye bye.